will be big spoilers for A Quiet Place in this video, so be warned. A Quiet Place was released this year, and it has become one of the most intriguing and refreshing horror monster movies. Again, there are going to be spoilers for this movie, so if you haven't seen it, you really should go give it a watch. So one thing that stuck out about the creatures from A Quiet Place was how indestructible they were, until a little deaf girl found out that her dysfunctional hearing aids caused a feedback loop, and that was their weakness. Since they're virtually indestructible and have armor that nothing can pierce, it made us wonder how they would fare against a traditional Xenomorph from the Alien franchise. The Quiet Place monsters are aliens from another planet, and even though there was some measure of intelligence there, it doesn't seem to be as enhanced as the Xenomorphs from Alien. Xenomorphs are not indestructible, but they do have armor via an exoskeleton, and they have highly corrosive acid for blood. The Xenomorphs stand about 7 feet high and can weigh up to 400 pounds if we're talking about Xenomorph XX121 drones. They tote a black outer shell, and like the Quiet Place monsters, have existed on several different planets. They have always been stowaways on several occasions, and when they land on different planets, they take over and cause catastrophe. Like the Quiet Place monsters, they are highly aggressive predatory creatures whose main purpose lies within the propagation of their species, and they do this by seemingly killing off every other life form. They also have pharyngeal jaws that can cut straight through metal in one go. They are a danger to almost everything. Like bees, ants, and wasps, they are known as eusocial species, which means they have a very large queen that houses all the babies, and the rest of the family consists of drones or subordinates that basically act as a glorified security or butlers or babysitters for the queen and her young. And one of the things that makes Xenomorphs so terrifying is the way that they reproduce. It is now believed that the drone Xenomorphs don't necessarily need the queen to reproduce, and that they have their own reproductive systems. It is said that initially the drone Xenomorphs had complete reproductive life cycles, and they did not need a queen to lay more eggs. It seems as though both instances of drones producing their own eggs and queens producing eggs are true. A Xenomorph would capture a victim and wrap it in cocoon silk near the hive, where the facehugger could then deposit the embryo inside its victim so it could later burst out. The facehugger is surprisingly strong, and once it gets its little legs wrapped around the head of its victim, it's almost impossible to get it off. It will force a tube down the victim's throat to lay the embryos in there, after which the baby that bursts from the victim takes on the traits of its previous host. At this moment, it is unknown how the Quiet Place monsters reproduce. The ones seen in John Krasinski's movie were already full grown, and that doesn't necessarily mean that there weren't juvenile creatures included in the arrival. Right now, we know very little about them, but what we do know is that they have indestructible armor that apparently all forms of artillery and different weapons could not penetrate. They have an exorbitant sensitivity to sound, and their claws are strong enough to tear straight through thick metal. The one weakness they have is very high-pitched noise. If a noise is unbearable, their ears malfunction, and for a while, their fleshy insides of their ears are exposed, which is a weakness. Now, if these two monsters, the Xenomorphs and the Quiet Place monsters, were to come upon one another, it is most likely the Xenomorphs that would be on the defense as the Quiet Place monsters attack anything that creates noise. The Xenomorphs are very stealthy, but I think we can agree that the Quiet Place monsters are equally as stealthy. These monsters are only ever revealed if there is a noise, and most of the time, you can't make them out until they're right upon you. As large as they are, standing to about 8 to 9 feet tall if extended, possibly taller if their legs are stretched out, they're surprisingly quiet in their movements. So, in this scenario, a Xenomorph could be walking through the forest, maybe to build a hive, and it is very possible that the Xenomorphs would not have already known that the Quiet Place monsters were in the area. With no prey around, Xenomorphs would have no need to be completely stealthy. Their noises would of course attract a Quiet Place monster. It seems as though the Quiet Place monsters are somewhat social, but not as social as the Xenomorphs. Once they're on a planet, they seem to stretch out and have their own territories. But if one is hurt, the others come to its rescue. It is also possible that these intelligent animals, being new to the planet, agree to stretch out to obliterate anything that is a potential threat, like the humans. Since they have such sensitive hearing, they could probably hear noises from kilometers away. Notice how in the movie, whenever a noise went off, only one monster came to investigate. However, in the end, when the mother and daughter kill one of the monsters, the other two came together. It took them a while to come as well, which means they had to have been many miles away and only decided to come when they realized that their comrade was in danger. The agonizing screeching noises the monster made as it was dying was not a sound that they would normally emit, so realizing their friend was in distress, the two monsters met up with one another and teamed up so they could fight the danger. This is probably what they did when they invaded and had to fight the army of humans. So again, back to the scenario. One of the Quiet Place monsters would come up to a Xenomorph and easily rip right through its armor. Even though the Xenomorph has tough armor, it is nowhere near as durable as the Quiet Place monsters. Ripping through the armor would result in a spray of acid blood, but it's fair to assume that because humans have already tried all manner of weaponry on the Quiet Place monsters, the acid from the Xenomorph may not even hurt it. The only weakness this creature has is its insides. The only way a Xenomorph may be able to injure this creature significantly is if its mouth was open and a facehugger was able to latch on to deposit the Xenomorph embryo inside. If that did happen, it would be easier for the embryo to push its way through the mouth, ear, or anal orifices of the creature after it was finished eating its way from the inside of it. It would be hard-pressed for the Quiet Place monster to even obliterate the facehugger. As we all know, those organisms move very fast and can easily get onto the back of the monster until it's able to make its way to the Quiet Place monster's mouth. But barring that, a one-on-one showdown between a Xenomorph and one of the Quiet Place monsters would most likely result in the Xenomorph dying. Now, since the insides of the Quiet Place monsters are completely vulnerable and Xenomorphs are highly intelligent, the Xenomorphs would most likely realize very quickly, number one, that the Quiet Place monsters respond to sound, which would cue them to go into stealth mode, and that number two, their insides are vulnerable. When the Quiet Place monsters perceive a threat that they're not sure of, they would armor up and nothing would penetrate their armor. They became comfortable with humans and Earth life because they realized that these prey surprisingly were easy to kill and not much of a threat. On the home world, from whence they originated, they probably had to evolve the armor they did because the other alien life that resided on their planet were worthy adversaries and probably not as easy to kill as humans. So they probably would not have opened up their ears so often as we see them doing in the movie when they're in hunting mode. The Xenomorphs have been proven to be very coy and they learn quickly based on observation of a threat. In stealth mode, the Xenomorph would be hard to spot or hear. They know how to be surprisingly quiet in an area we would find hard to keep silent in. One would probably wait above in a tree and another on the ground. After seeing these things, these Quiet Place monsters, kill their comrades, Xenomorphs would then work together to formulate a plan to hunt it down. One of the Xenomorphs would then make a screeching noise on the ground to attract the Quiet Place monster to its location, while the other waits in that location above in a tree. As a Quiet Place monster reaches the location of where it heard the noise, it would hear silence, and then open its inner ear to more adequately identify what made the noise. During this time, or maybe before, the Xenomorph above the tree, having been cut on its tail by one of its comrades, would use that moment to throw some of its acid blood into the creature's ear. We've seen Xenomorphs do that in movies when they're cut, using their acid blood as a weapon. Some of the acid blood would hit the outside of the Quiet Place monster, but then a significant amount of it would hit the inside of the ear, causing the creature to wince in pain and close up its ear immediately. The ear, being the most sensitive organ on the creature, would be slowly burned through by the acid. Based on the John Krasinski movie, when the creature's ears are under attack, all the segments on their head open and close in succession, making them even more vulnerable. Now, there are no high-pitched noises to cause the agony, but the acid inside the head of the creature would cause the creature to open up its head, trying to get it out desperately. This would trigger another attack from the Xenomorph above, flinging more acid into the open head segments, which consequently causes more pain to the creature. By this time, another Quiet Place monster is on its way, as a Xenomorph on the ground revealed itself as the creature is writhing in pain, its head opening and closing. From afar, watching the creature squirm around, the Xenomorph on the ground would aim the sharp scythe on its tail straight into the quiet monster's head and end its suffering. If the Queen Xenomorph was in the picture and there was water, it's unsure as to whether or not these creatures would hold their breath underwater longer than the Xenomorphs. We know that Xenomorphs can hold their breath surprisingly long underwater, and so can the Quiet Place monsters. The Queen Xenomorph would be significantly stronger than the Quiet Place monsters, but she would be unable to crush their armor. If the Quiet Place monster's armor is strong enough to withstand bombings and high-caliber bullets, then they probably would be able to withstand 10,000 pounds of pressure from the Queen. So here's the scoop. When considering a one-on-one battle between the two of sheer force, The Quiet Place monster would win hands down. Its armor is way more strong than that of the Xenomorphs and impenetrable. Even the acid from the Xenomorph's blood would not be able to penetrate the armor. If the Xenomorphs used their wit and engaged their stealth ability, they would most certainly be able to outsmart these creatures and defeat them, preferably one-on-one. Xenomorphs have been seen to work together by observing and executing a plan as demonstrated in Alien Resurrection. If a facehugger was in the midst, it would be much more agile than the Quiet Place monster. The Quiet Place monster would realize that it's under attack though, and close its mouth and other orifices to prevent penetration. I know, that sounds really gross. If it were a situation where there were multiple Quiet Place monsters and multiple Xenomorphs, the Quiet Place monsters would obliterate the Xenomorphs. A queen Xenomorph would be able to adequately throw a Quiet Place monster around, but it would do no damage. The Quiet Place monsters would keep attacking, and since they would be more agile than the queen, they would be able to jump on top of her and slice into her over and over again until she was dead. Since their armor is so fortifiable, even if the queen were to smash them around or try to step on them, it most likely would do no good, as the creatures seem impervious to all manner of different attacks, including bombing. Now, if for some reason a facehugger was able to penetrate a Quiet Place monster, then we would have really big problems on our hands. So, that concludes our video. How would you see a battle between these two amazing monsters go down? Let us know in the comments. And thanks for watching, guys. This has been Altiori. You ask, we answer.